In 1927, the United States Supreme Court declared the violation of one's reproductive rights to be constitutional. This decision was made based on the growing scientific ideology known as eugenics. In 1883, beginning in Europe, Francis Galton advocated for the societal encouragement of marriage and repopulation between the fittest citizens. He suggested that a monetary incentive should be provided to promote this idea, which he coined as the term eugenics, meaning well-born. To establish the foundation of eugenics, Galton combined the concepts from previous studies of heredity with his own ideas. He created pedigrees of some of the most successful families in Europe, showing their recorded ancestry. From these studies, he determined that intelligence and talent were inherited, neglecting to observe and account for environmental factors and access to resources. Eugenics made its way to America in the early 1900s, where it matured into a popular study that was enforced in school curriculums. At this time in the United States, the concept of social Darwinism, or the theory that the more powerful and wealthy people were superior to the disadvantaged ones, was rapidly growing. Therefore, eugenicists were quick to advocate that certain traits, including feeble-mindedness, criminality, epilepsy, and many diseases, were diluting the purity of America and should be eliminated from the country's genetic pool. As time progressed, eugenics diffused from the minds of the American society and into the nation's legislation. In 1924, a new law supporting state-enforced sterilization for those deemed genetically unfit was created in Virginia, taking a young woman named Carrie Buck as its very first victim in 1927. Carrie was born in Charlottesville, Virginia in 1906. She attended school locally until she was withdrawn in the 6th grade by her foster parents to provide domestic labor, a common practice in southern states in the early 1900s. When Carrie was 17, she was raped by her foster mother's nephew, resulting in an illegitimate pregnancy, which was socially frowned upon. In an effort to preserve their reputation, Carrie's foster parents sought to have her institutionalized for feeble-mindedness. Due to the growing movement and support for eugenics in the 1920s, it was particularly easy to declare that a person was feeble-minded, with the term applying to virtually anyone that deviated from social normalcy.
In 1924, when Carrie was committed to the Virginia colony for epileptics and feeble-minded, Dr. Albert Priddy, a superintendent of the colony, was in search of a patient to sterilize. After he was previously sued for the infringement of rights and forced sterilization of a patient, Priddy petitioned Aubrey Strode, an expert draftsman, to draft a new law protecting eugenic sterilizations. In an effort to test the constitutionality of this bill, Priddy decided to set up a court case to determine whether the new law would protect his practice in court. With Carrie and her newborn daughter having joined Carrie's biological mother in the Virginia colony, Priddy selected her as his experimental subject. In the eyes of eugenicists, 3 generations of the Buck family were available to strengthen the argument of the case, and by laws of heredity, as understood through a eugenical lens, all 3 generations were feeble-minded. To satisfy the law, the court appointed an attorney, Irving Whitehead, to defend Carrie, while Aubrey Strode defended Priddy. However, Carrie Buck's right to a fair trial was violated nonetheless. Not only was Whitehead a former director of the Virginia colony, but he was also a known supporter and friend of the opposing attorney. After winning the county trial in Virginia, Dr. Priddy died and was replaced with Dr. Bell. The court case, now under the name Buck v. Bell, was upheld by the Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals and moved on to the United States Supreme Court, the highest court in the nation. During each of the trials, Strode prepared an extensive argument, with his brief alone consisting of 44 pages. He presented several eugenical arguments attempting to prove the feeble-mindedness of Carrie, all of which were circumstantial and extremely easy to discredit. However, Whitehead, consumed by his own eugenical biases, failed to provide a counter-argument or call witnesses to defend Buck. The Supreme Court trial of Buck v. Bell adjourned with an 8-1 ruling in favor of Strode, with Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes making the bold and infamous claim that 3 generations of imbeciles is enough. This decision upheld the constitutionality of the Virginia sterilization law and set a legal precedent that would diffuse to many other states in America.
The announcement and broadcasting of the court's decision ignited a fear of increased surgical violence, and many people that were against eugenics were enraged. As protests emerged and public outcry started to rise, the accepted science of eugenics began to be questioned for the first time. In response to the protesting, Carrie Buck's former attorney, Irving Whitehead, petitioned the Supreme Court for a rehearing of the Buck v. Bell case. Whitehead finally began to demonstrate his competence in his petition, in which he attacked the foundational science of eugenics and the belief in the heredity of mental illnesses and criminality. To support his argument, he even presented evidence that many medical professionals actually rejected the benefits of involuntary sterilization. Regardless of his strong argument, the Supreme Court denied Whitehead's petition and officially closed the case. The decision of Buck v. Bell communicated a message of confidence to the rest of the United States, causing many other states to begin enforcing existing sterilization laws or creating new ones in which the wording closely resembled that of Virginia's. Outside of the United States, Germany was also feeling the impact of American eugenics. Adolf Hitler had long admired the movement and its policies, even collaborating with American leaders to strengthen his own movement. After the ruling of Buck v. Bell, America experienced a surge in eugenical success, with a total of 32 states adopting and enforcing sterilization laws, and a total of 60,000 forced or coerced sterilizations.
As the communication of American success spread, this advancement became a goal for Germany. The Nazi Party created sterilization laws based heavily on Laughlin's model law, the same model that influenced Virginia's sterilization law, tried in the Buck v. Bell case. For his sterilization work, Laughlin was even awarded an honorary doctorate of medicine from Germany's University of Heidelberg, further showing the association between American and German eugenics. However, World War II and the Holocaust brought about a decline for American eugenics by revealing the morbid agenda behind the movement. When Nazi sterilization measures transformed into the use of concentration camps, gas chambers, and mass genocide, many American scientists, doctors, and political figures began condemning eugenical ideas. By the end of World War II, eugenics gained a severely negative connotation, and the word was dropped from news titles and organization names. After decades of injustice and prejudice, the science behind eugenics was publicly discredited as new discoveries of genetics, heredity, and eventually DNA appeared. With these discoveries and medical innovations, scientists began to learn that behavioral traits and many performance qualities were not purely inherited, but were in fact created with a balance of environmental factors, genetic factors, and learned behaviors.
Although the foundation of eugenics had been discredited, Buck v. Bell was never overturned, and many states neglected to repeal their sterilization laws. As a result, while the rate and publicity of forced sterilizations decreased, they never truly ended. Consistent sterilizations continued into the late 1900s, and more modernly, people are having their reproductive rights taken away due to their race or a variety of disorders, as America begins to enter an era of new eugenics. These sterilizations are justified with citations drawn from the Buck v. Bell case. While the Supreme Court is frequently discussed with notions of authority and justice, the case of Buck v. Bell is often regarded as one of the most disturbing injustices upheld by the highest court in the nation. Buck v. Bell has become an outlet that people have used to endorse their own personal biases, continuing to fuel the sterilization of those deemed unfit. As countless examples continue to demonstrate that history does repeat itself, the history of American eugenics and support of the Buck v. Bell ruling reveals the possibility of a devastating future.